let's get started. Thanks for joining in. And this will be our last discussion on Advaita Vedanta. Maybe that's a Yahoo moment. So, enlightenment does not happen in time. It happens when time stops. Those words were spoken by Sri Punja only a few decades ago. But what do they mean? It does not mean that when time stops, enlightenment occurs. There is no cause and effect relationship here. It does not involve time. It actually occurs at the moment we fully awaken, which happens to be when we step out of time. There's simultaneity. Enlightenment, or perfection, is not relative and thus cannot have a time associated with it. Enlightenment, like power or truth or wisdom, is. And because it is, it always was and always will be. We are, again, as difficult as it is to imagine, having a dream which sets us apart from that which we truly are. So when we eventually get out of time or withdraw from this matrix, we naturally default to who we are, enlightened, perfected beings. Sri Punja also had some other remarks over the years. He was once asked whether there was a gestation period, so to speak, for the spiritual seeker before becoming enlightened. His reply was, "You are ripe for enlightenment when you want nothing else. In order to be born as a baby, you have to spend 9 months getting bigger and bigger. For enlightenment, you have to get smaller and smaller and smaller until you disappear completely." Now, the you that he refers to is the smaller you, the ego self, the illusory you, the you that isn't. Once that totally disappears, all that remains is you, the higher self, the real you. Realization is direct knowledge of the real self. It has nothing to do with the body or its senses, the mind or its thoughts. The body, the senses, the mind, and the thoughts are of relevance only to the world appearance and only to the illusory ego. Think of it this way. Picture a light placed in a container. Let's call it a lamp. A lamp illuminates the objects around it. If all the objects are removed, that is, taken out of the picture, the light remains, illuminating itself. Similarly, when we relinquish all attachment to the world of appearance and transient pleasure and pain, awareness remains, illuminating itself in Satchitananda, or eternal bliss. Since enlightenment is not a process and there is no person who can become realized, there is not a lot that can be done to achieve enlightenment. Let me say that again. Since enlightenment is not a process and there is no person who can become realized, there is not a lot that can be done to achieve enlightenment. So let's look at what I just said. Let's break it down. Enlightenment is not a process. It's a truth. There is nothing about it that needs to become. Therefore, it cannot be a process. There is no person who can become realized means that there is no one here. This is an illusion, and the body is a mask. To this point, when we think of a person, we always picture or imagine a body. And this is definitely not who or what we are. Since there is no body, there can be no person, and since this is illusory, a dream, it cannot be populated with anything. A person is not part of reality, with a capital R. The last part of the statement I spoke is there is not a lot that can be done to achieve enlightenment. Nothing can be done by a person who is not there, or a body that is non-existent, by an ego thought system that itself is illusory. Again, since enlightenment is not a process, and there is no person who can become realized, there is not a lot that can be done to achieve enlightenment. Now, we as people are fixated on the external. How do we know this? Just look around and observe the actions of others. Look and observe your own actions, your own thoughts. We are constantly focused in on what's going on around us, from politics to sports to our money situation to the weather patterns now prevalent on this planet, to global warming, to the icebergs at both the North and South Poles, to what our neighbors, families, and friends are saying about other people and other things. Here's a good example of what I'm trying to convey. The other night, I dropped my keys near my car in my parking lot, which is very dark. I couldn't see anything. So about 40 feet away, there's a lamp, a bright lamp. So I walked over there and continued my search there. After about 10 minutes, someone approached, asked what I was looking for, listened to my story, then asked me, if you dropped your keys near your car and it's 40 feet away, why are you over here looking for them? And I said, it's brighter under the lamp. End of story. Now, you may think that is the dumbest story and wasn't even worth telling. It is a dumb story. What's even dumber is that every one of us does this every single day. We continue looking everywhere but within ourselves for happiness, or for our true nature, or for knowledge and for truth. There are people out there in this world who are lonely, and they are looking for others to fill the void that is within themselves. Let's face it, it's easier to look outside, to a place out there that has nothing to do with us in here, but we're not ever going to find anything out there to fill a void. On the subject of enlightenment, we may hear or see something one day that cuts through all the garbage in our heads, all the crap, the habits, the desires, the fears we hold, and it rings with a quality of truth, a very high resonance of truth. We've probably all had those moments. And something in us recognizes this. It is the self glimpsing itself. This one occurrence can begin the process of awakening. Responding to this trigger and making efforts to discover more and more of this truth, there comes a time eventually when effort is needed no longer. So if you have that moment of aha, and you start to search and search and search, after a while, it's not effortful, as there is no longer confusion or fear. In other words, we are drawn towards the light. We choose miracles instead of grievances. But at present, we are effectively asleep. We are either totally unaware of our true nature, the case for most people, or we have an inkling, a tiny inkling, a belief. There are a few, relatively, who are beyond the beginning stage, but most of us are asleep or dreaming. The good news is that we will eventually wake up, some quicker than others. And by the way, every single seeming person who has ever appeared on this planet will wake up and return home. So what happens, by the way, or what is it that happens at the moment of realization when one moves from the vantage point of an individual to knowing that there is no such thing as an individual? In other words, what happens when we move from the way we think now to an entirely different vantage point? Well, at a certain point there comes a moment when there is deep understanding and acceptance of the truth. Yet there is still going to be an ego that needs to fall away. A clinging to the sense that I am a doer, an enjoyer, a participant needs to fall away. What is the event that must occur before we transition from intellectual acceptance, which each one of you listening has already had intellectual epiphanies, but we got to go to full liberation. So some say that intellectual understanding is the beginning of the end of seeking drama. In other words, once we understand all of the teachings intellectually, it is simply a matter of letting it all be, letting it marinate, without any expectations. The gradual assimilation of the knowledge gained will eventually transform into full realization. This may occur in this lifetime, and may happen over a series of times, chapters as I call them. The transition is not a physical event, however, as matter, this body, is only an illusory manifestation with names and forms attributed to ignorance. My name is Michael. Your name is Susan, Larry, Deborah. That's ignorance, because that is not who we are. Similarly, realization is not an emotional, mental, or intellectual event, as advancement has nothing to do with mechanical or chemical functions. Although it involves the loss of avidya, ignorance, the imparting of any specific knowledge does not bring about the transition to self-realization. From the Advaita viewpoint, it is something that occurs spontaneously from effortless effort, mixed with surrender to attain a sudden realization that what is. This subject, that is what happens at the moment of realization, only has meaning to us at the relative level. That is the level at which we are all at. After we transition to a full state of realization, reality or heaven is the same as always. So any explanation for what is happening in this dream cannot be found in heaven, because first of all, there are not two, and second of all, this dream state or this illusion doesn't exist. So to address that which isn't would be a waste of time. Also impossible to do in a subject that has no bearing in reality and thus could not be entertained on the other side. It is only in this dream that we entertain that which is impossible and does not exist. So, the paradigm shift from living in the dream to living reality may be similar to what people experienced way back when they learned that Copernicus was right. Remember Copernicus? People had to go from the belief that we are the center of the universe, the sun revolves around us, to a completely different set of philosophic and practical reality that had to be mind-bending for most. You mean we are not the center of the universe? We, meaning the ego? It's not about us? I find that hard to swallow. Well, I bet that there are those who went to their graves back in his day, holding on to the belief that the sun revolved around the earth, that man was the center of the universe. Maybe those living today, some living today, think the same thing. Now, there's also the position that there are conditions that must be satisfied before realization is possible. First, we have to stop all the mental and verbal positioning about what realization means. You know, like the mind chatter. This also means dropping all of the mental concepts we have that supports our already current position that ultimately just bolsters our ego. Let's face it, we may, every single one of us, be so off on what we believe that we just have to let it go, surrender entirely in order to realize. We also must drop thoughts and perceptions in favor of intuition. We must learn to stop reacting to events outside of us and eliminate the startle response, because there is nothing outside of us. What's out there came from in here, and we get startled by it as though it's out there only. We need to start practicing certain types of yoga and learn to become a detached witness. Also practicing humility and controlling our unsuppressed emotions, which usurp our time and energy, detracting us from what we should be focused on. Finally, our search for truth must be so important that all other desires cease. Well, that's not happening too quickly, is it? Nope. There are things that each of us want to do and accomplish. After all, we have a bucket list, don't we? In effect, we still wish to maintain our individuality and separation. The Sanskrit word that is used for the process of self-realization is moksha, meaning emancipation or liberation. Moksha, M-O-K-S-H-A. When moksha occurs, all identification and belief in individuality and separateness ceases. All perceived limitations disappear. The individual is no more, as it is subsumed into the all, or the allness, or the divine. Now, as we conclude the study of Advaita Vedanta, let me say that it is also known as the direct path, a term coined by Ramana Maharshi. He stated that the traditional long-term approach to spiritual enlightenment over many lifetimes is not necessary in order to realize the truth. However, direct path is not really a path, it's more of a non-path, yet it's not easy. Contrarily, the other traditions that I've spoken of over the months, such as Bhakti Yoga, Karma Yoga, and Jnana Yoga, the fourfold practice of Shankara, and many others, are considered to be easy compared to direct path Advaita Vedanta. That is, the others all have rituals and specific practices which they teach that must be done, whereas in direct path, the instructions are less obvious, as one cannot actually do anything, as there is really nothing to be achieved because there is no one here. Imagine subscribing to a philosophy, which is what I've been talking to you about since the first week of March, where you're not here, you can't do anything, and therefore there's nothing to be done. If the reality is that there is only one, then we must already be one. Therefore, nothing needs to be done or can be done. We've already spoken about the fact that the only thing that is done by the body, and the body is the domain of the ego. And it's certainly not the ego that is attempting to ascend. We just need to acquire the knowledge and then have the direct experience that knowledge leads to truth. We have to experience that, not just know it in our heads. What seems to happen, however, is our current state of ignorance is such that we are unable to understand, gain knowledge, or attain wisdom. So we determine that we must follow a difficult path, because after all, nothing good is ever accomplished without sacrifice. An ego concept that most of us have bought into, and that is an ego concept. In a sense, for any path, what we are doing is unlearning. It's a basic tenet of Advaita Vedanta and A Course in Miracles. We are unlearning so that we may return to a path of innocence. It requires surrendering all of our claims that we are individuals, separate, independent from others, that we are able to make decisions, that we are able to enjoy the results of our actions of the body that don't exist. Not until all such notions have been given up do we ripen enough to acknowledge the truth and drop our notions of separateness and individuality. Now, direct path tends to be taken for those who have already taken paths, religions, philosophies, but then realize that the path they are on is not getting them anywhere, while yet they arrive at the conclusion that there is indeed only the self. When this is intellectually believed but still not fully realized, there is not much more to be done according to Advaita Vedanta. So in effect, those who adopt this path give up trying because they realize that it was only the ego that was trying anyway. Indeed, those who are on the direct path tend to live their lives fully, knowing that the final truth will be revealed because they have surrendered. It is only when they have done, quote unquote, all that they can that they realize that they cannot do anything at all. From the direct path perspective, no preparation is needed, as we are already that which is. From this viewpoint, there's no real need for religions. In fact, it might be said that religions maintain the illusion of separateness and insignificance. Let's face it, if there are not two, the meaning of Advaita, then there is only one. Another way of saying this is that we are God. Now, most people will say to anyone who makes that statement, you need therapy. Because none of us want to consider this possibility. Why? All of our understanding and teachings have been geared towards believing in our individuality and separateness and our need for accomplishment. Our teachings from many spiritual books fosters the importance of the body. The Bible in particular. Further, this need for individuality creates a sense of separateness that ensures our separateness from all that is, aka God. In the end, Advaita Vedanta, or direct path, states that there are no enlightened people, and in the entire history of the universe, there has never been anyone who became enlightened. Don't panic. As I previously stated, there is no one to become enlightened. As this, all of this, is but a dream, and dreams only contain illusions and fictitious characters attempting to enact a role that memory is dimly aware of. We are already enlightened. We, what is we? We are spirit. I could tell you more and bring this series of lectures to a more fitting end, but in the end it is irrelevant, because I am speaking to myself, as there are not two. We are in this dream together, yet we are not in this dream at all. We are in reality, and as such, we are one. Next week, an entirely different topic. Have a great day.